Lucas Bennett had built his reputation on being merciless. At 32 years old, he stood among the youngest and most formidable real estate developers in New York City, a man whose name alone could make tenants tremble and rival firms reconsider their strategies. His office occupied the entire 45th floor of a glass tower in Midtown Manhattan, and from those windows he could survey a kingdom he had carved out through shrewd calculation and an absolute refusal to let sentiment interfere with profit. Properties were assets to be acquired, leveraged, and liquidated. Tenants were temporary occupants whose personal circumstances held no bearing on the cold mathematics of return on investment. Compassion was a luxury he had learned early in life that he could not afford, and in the 15 years since he had aged out of the foster care system with nothing but a high school diploma and burning ambition, he had never once regretted checking his emotions at the door. The morning began as most did for Lucas, with him arriving at the office before dawn to review acquisition reports while the city still slept beneath him. His assistant, Rachel Torres, would arrive at 7:30 with his black coffee and a leather portfolio containing the day's priorities, arranged in order of urgency. Rachel had worked for Lucas for nearly 7 years, long enough to read his moods from the set of his shoulders and the tone of his single-word responses. She understood that Lucas Bennett demanded perfection, not because he enjoyed wielding power over others, but because he demanded it first and foremost from himself. Every property closing needed to be flawless. Every contract required triple verification. Every loose end had to be tied off before moving to the next deal. It was this relentless precision that had transformed Bennett Realty Group from a modest startup into one of the most successful development firms in the city. On this particular Wednesday morning in late October, storm clouds gathered over Manhattan with the heavy promise of rain that would turn the streets slick and the commute miserable. Lucas stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows with his hands clasped behind his back, studying the weather as if he could bend it to his will through sheer force of concentration. His office reflected the man himself, minimalist to the point of austerity, with a massive desk of polished black granite, 2 leather chairs for visitors who rarely lingered, and shelves lined with books on architecture, finance, and strategic negotiation. There were no photographs, no personal mementos, nothing to suggest that Lucas Bennett existed as anything more than the deals he closed and the buildings he acquired. The walls were a cool grey that matched his suits, and the only splash of colour came from the abstract painting behind his desk, all sharp angles and cold blues that a decorator had insisted would project authority. Rachel entered at precisely 7:30, carrying her tablet and the inevitable coffee. She crossed the room with the efficient stride of someone who wasted no motion, setting the portfolio on his desk and pulling up the day's schedule on her tablet. "Morning, Lucas," she said, her tone brisk and professional. "3 closings yesterday all went through without complications. The commercial space in Chelsea has 4 interested buyers already lined up, and we should see offers by end of week. The residential tower in Tribeca sold the last penthouse unit for $3.2 million, which is 18% over our initial projection." She paused, swiping to the next screen. "And the Queen's foreclosure is ready for final processing." Lucas turned from the window and moved to his desk, accepting the coffee and taking a measured sip before setting it down. He flipped open the portfolio, his eyes scanning documents with practiced efficiency. Property addresses, financial projections, legal status reports, everything organized exactly as he required. His gaze snagged on the last file in the stack, a single-family home in Queens, a modest 2-story structure with a foreclosure order due to 8 months of missed mortgage payments. The property value was unremarkable, perhaps $280,000 in its current condition, maybe $320 with renovations. The profit margin would be minimal by Bennett Realty standards, hardly worth the attention of someone at Lucas's level. These smaller residential foreclosures were typically delegated to junior associates who could handle the paperwork and property transfers without requiring executive oversight. "Why is this still crossing my desk?" Lucas asked, tapping the file with one finger. Rachel shifted her weight slightly, a tell that Lucas had learned meant she was about to deliver information he might not want to hear. "The tenant has requested extensions multiple times. She's called the office at least a dozen times in the past month. Legal says we've been more than generous with the timeline, but she keeps trying to negotiate for more time." Lucas closed the file and set it aside. "Then have legal send the standard foreclosure notice and proceed with eviction. There's no reason this should still be occupying our time." Rachel nodded, but did not move toward the door. Lucas glanced up, one eyebrow raised in silent question. "There's one more detail you should probably know," Rachel said carefully. "She has children. 3 of them. The tenant is a single mother. Her husband died about 2 years ago in a workplace accident, and she's been struggling to keep up with payments since then." Lucas felt his jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. Over the years, he had heard every conceivable sob story, every desperate plea for leniency, every heartbreaking tale of misfortune that tenants hoped would soften his resolve. He had learned to hear these stories without letting them penetrate, to acknowledge the human suffering while understanding that allowing emotion to guide business decisions was a path to bankruptcy. The moment you started making exceptions, the moment you let personal circumstances dictate your actions, you lost the edge that separated successful developers from failures. "The presence of children doesn't alter the contract," Lucas said flatly, his tone making clear that this particular piece of information changed nothing. "I understand," Rachel replied, her expression neutral. "I just thought you should have the full picture before we proceed." Lucas picked up the file again, staring at the address printed in neat block letters across the top. 247 Willow Avenue, Queens. He should hand this off to one of the junior associates, let them handle the unpleasant task of serving eviction papers while he focused on the larger deals that actually moved the needle for Bennett Realty. That was the logical choice, the efficient allocation of his time and attention. But instead, he heard himself say, "Clear my morning schedule. I'll handle this one personally." Rachel's eyes widened slightly, surprise breaking through her professional composure. "You want to serve the eviction yourself?" she asked, as if she might have misheard. "Yes," Lucas said simply, offering no explanation. Rachel hesitated for just a moment, clearly wanting to ask why a man who commanded $100 million projects was personally handling a foreclosure worth barely $250,000. But she knew better than to question Lucas when he had made a decision. "I'll have Raymond bring the car around in 20 minutes, she said, and left to make the arrangements. After the door closed behind her, Lucas remained standing at his desk with the file still in his hand. He told himself this was simply due diligence, a hands-on approach to ensuring that even the smallest details of his business were handled properly. But somewhere in the back of his mind, in a place he rarely allowed himself to access, he suspected it was something else entirely. Perhaps it was curiosity about the woman who had been calling the office with such persistence, refusing to accept the inevitable. Perhaps it was a vague sense that he owed it to himself to look this tenant in the eye, rather than sending a subordinate to do his uncomfortable work. Or perhaps, though he would never have admitted it aloud, it was the ghost of his own past whispering that he should witness firsthand what it looked like when someone lost everything. The drive from Manhattan to Queens took nearly 50 minutes in the crawling traffic, rain beginning to fall in earnest as Raymond navigated the town car across the bridge. Lucas sat in the back seat reviewing emails on his phone, determinedly not thinking about where they were headed or what he would say when he arrived. Raymond, who had been his driver for 8 years and understood the value of silence, said nothing as they left behind the soaring towers of Midtown for the lower-rise neighborhoods of Outer Queens. The buildings here were different, older structures of brick and wood rather than steel and glass, with trees lining streets where children still played outside despite the weather. These were neighborhoods where families put down roots, where people knew their neighbors' names, where a sense of community still existed in ways that had long since vanished from the more affluent areas of the city. Willow Avenue turned out to be a tree-lined street of modest single-family homes, some well-maintained with fresh paint and manicured lawns, others showing signs of financial strain with peeling siding and overgrown yards. Number 247 fell somewhere in between. The house was a small two-story structure with faded yellow paint that might once have been cheerful, but now looked tired. The front porch sagged slightly, one of the steps cracked down the middle. The lawn needed mowing, scattered with fallen leaves that had started to mat down from the rain. A rusted tricycle lay on its side near the walkway, and a plastic playhouse with a cracked roof sat half hidden in the tall grass along the side of the house. But there were also signs of care and attention, flower boxes beneath the windows that had been planted with autumn mums, even if they were now drooping in the rain. A welcome mat at the front door, worn but clean. Children's drawings taped to the inside of the front window, visible through the glass. Raymond pulled the car to the curb and put it in park, glancing back at Lucas in the rearview mirror. "Would you like me to wait here, sir?" he asked quietly. Lucas nodded, already reaching for the door handle. This shouldn't take long. He stepped out into the rain, which had intensified to a steady downpour that immediately began soaking through his suit jacket. He should have brought an umbrella, but the walk to the front door was short enough that it hardly seemed worth the effort. As he made his way up the cracked walkway, Lucas found himself cataloguing the property's deficiencies with the trained eye of someone who had evaluated thousands of buildings. The roof needed repair, probably had water damage in the attic. The gutters were clogged with leaves and debris. The foundation showed hairline cracks that suggested settling issues. The porch boards were soft in places, likely rotted underneath. This house was barely holding together. One hard winter or major storm away from serious structural problems. But at the same time, he noticed the little touches that spoke of someone trying to make this place a home, despite limited resources. The house numbers beside the door had been recently polished. A wind chime hung from the porch eave, its gentle tinkling barely audible over the rain. A small herb garden grew in pots along the porch railing, basil and rosemary and what looked like mint, still green despite the advancing autumn. Someone lived here who cared about beauty even when practical concerns should have consumed all their attention. Lucas climbed the porch steps carefully, testing each one before putting his full weight on it, and finally stood before the front door. His hand hovered over the doorbell for a moment while he gathered his thoughts and prepared the speech he had delivered countless times before. This was a business transaction, nothing more. He would be professional, clear, and firm, but not cruel. He would explain the situation, provide the legal documentation, and give the tenant a reasonable timeline to vacate. Then he would return to his office and move on to the next item on his agenda. He pressed the doorbell and heard it chime somewhere inside the house. Footsteps approached, and then the door opened to reveal a woman who was younger than Lucas had expected. She appeared to be in her early 30s, with smooth, dark brown skin and expressive eyes that held exhaustion and wariness in equal measure. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore jeans and a faded blue sweater, both clean but clearly worn. There were dark circles under her eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights, but her posture was straight and her gaze steady as she looked at him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then the woman's expression shifted from wariness to recognition, though Lucas was certain they had never met. "You're from Bennett Realty," she said quietly, a statement rather than a question. Her voice had a musical quality, despite the obvious strain beneath it. "Yes, ma'am," Lucas replied, keeping his tone neutral and professional. "My name is Lucas Bennett. I own Bennett Realty Group, and I'm here regarding the status of this property." Something flickered in the woman's eyes, fear perhaps, or resignation, but she did not step back or close the door. Instead, she squared her shoulders, as if preparing for a blow she had known was coming. "I know who you are," she said. "I've been calling your office for weeks. I'm Jasmine Hayes." Before Lucas could launch into his prepared explanation, movement behind Jasmine drew his attention. 3 children had appeared in the hallway behind their mother, curiosity overcoming whatever instructions they had likely been given to stay out of sight. The oldest was a boy of perhaps 11, with serious eyes and his mother's features, standing protectively close to Jasmine, with one hand resting on her arm. The middle child was younger, maybe 8, with a gap-toothed smile that faltered as he registered the tension in the air. And the youngest was a little girl who could not have been more than 5 years old, with her hair pulled into 2 puffed ponytails, tied with ribbons that did not quite match, clutching a stuffed rabbit that had clearly seen better days. The carefully constructed speech Lucas had prepared evaporated from his mind. He had known intellectually that Jasmine Hayes had children. Rachel had told him as much, but seeing them in person was something else entirely. The oldest boy's protective stance, one arm positioned as if ready to pull his mother back if the stranger at the door proved threatening. The middle child's uncertain expression, caught between childish curiosity and growing awareness that something was wrong. The little girl peering out with wide eyes that held no understanding of why a man in an expensive suit would be standing on their porch in the rain. "Please," Jasmine said, and Lucas heard the tremor beneath her attempted composure. "I know I'm behind on the payments. I know you have every legal right to proceed with foreclosure. But I'm asking you for a little more time, just 1 more month. I lost my job 3 months ago, but I've been interviewing and I have something promising lined up. I just need a chance to catch up." Lucas opened his mouth to respond, but before he could form words, the little girl darted around her mother's legs and ran right up to him. "Mama says we have to be kind to everyone," she announced with the utter confidence of a child who had not yet learned to doubt her mother's wisdom. "So I made you something." She thrust a piece of paper at Lucas, pressing it into his hand with sticky fingers that smelled faintly of grape jelly. Jasmine's eyes went wide with alarm. "Maya, what are you doing? Get back inside right now." But it was too late. Lucas looked down at the paper the child had given him. It was a drawing executed in crayon with the unsteady hand of a kindergartner, a lopsided heart colored in with red and pink, the colors bleeding into each other. Across the top in large, painstaking letters were the words, "For Mama," and beneath the heart was a stick figure family. A tall figure labeled Mama, 3 smaller figures labeled Tyler, Cameron and Maya, and off to one side a figure with angel wings labeled Daddy. Something cracked inside Lucas Bennett's chest, a fissure opening in the carefully constructed armor he had spent 15 years building. He stared at the drawing, at the child's attempt to capture her family in crayon and construction paper, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt the full weight of another person's humanity pressing against his own. This was not just a foreclosure file, not just a property address and a list of missed payments. This was a family, a mother working desperately to keep her children housed and fed, a father who had been taken too soon, leaving his wife to shoulder burdens she should never have had to carry alone, children who did not understand why their home was being threatened, who still believed that kindness and crayon drawings could solve problems that had nothing to do with kindness or art. Maya smiled up at him with complete trust, apparently satisfied that her gift had solved whatever problem the serious man in the wetsuit had brought to their door. "Do you like it?" she asked brightly. "Mama always says the best presents are the ones you make yourself." Lucas's throat felt tight, words refusing to come. He managed a nod, carefully folding the drawing and slipping it into his jacket pocket. Jasmine scooped Maya up quickly, embarrassment and fear warring on her face. "I'm so sorry, she doesn't understand what's happening. Maya, go back inside with your brothers right now." The oldest boy, Tyler, gently took Maya's hand and led her away from the door, though he kept glancing back over his shoulder at Lucas with an expression that was far too old for his age, the look of a child who had learned too early to worry about adult problems. Jasmine turned back to Lucas, and he could see her fighting to maintain her composure. "Mr. Bennett, I know this is just business for you. I know you've probably heard every excuse and every sob story, but I'm not asking for charity. I'm just asking for time. This is the only home my children have ever known. Their father and I bought this house 10 years ago when Tyler was a baby. Every room has memories. Maya's height is marked on the kitchen door frame. Cameron learned to ride his bike in the driveway. This isn't just a property to us. It's our home." She stopped, seeming to realize that she was pleading with a man who had built his entire career on not caring about such things. "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't matter to you. I just needed you to understand what this means to us." Lucas looked past Jasmine into the house, catching glimpses of their life through the open door. The living room was small and cluttered, but not messy, clearly the home of a family with limited space who worked hard to keep things organized. Toys were stacked neatly in a wicker basket beside a worn sofa. A stack of library books sat on a coffee table, the spines suggesting a mix of children's picture books and adult mysteries. School artwork covered one wall, each piece carefully taped up as if it were gallery-worthy. He could smell something cooking in the kitchen, soup maybe, or a stew simmering for dinner. This was a home where a mother was doing everything in her power to give her children a stable, loving environment, despite impossible circumstances. "I'll review your case personally," Lucas heard himself say, the words coming from somewhere outside his conscious decision-making process. "Give me 1 week to go over everything. I'll get back to you with a decision." Jasmine blinked, confusion replacing the resignation that had been settling over her features. "I don't understand." "What does that mean? Are you still going to evict us?" Lucas met her eyes, seeing the desperate hope she was trying not to let herself feel. "It means I'm not making any decisions today. You'll hear from me within a week. That's all I can promise right now." Before Jasmine could respond, before he could change his mind or second-guess this inexplicable deviation from his standard operating procedure, Lucas turned and walked back to the car. The rain had intensified, soaking through his clothes and plastering his hair to his forehead, but he barely noticed. He climbed into the back seat and Raymond pulled away from the curb without comment, though Lucas caught the driver's curious glance in the rearview mirror. As they drove back toward Manhattan, Lucas sat in silence with his hand in his jacket pocket, fingers touching the folded edge of Maya's drawing. He did not pull it out to look at again. He did not need to. The image was burned into his mind. The crayon heart, the stick figure family, the father with angel wings watching over his wife and children from above. For the first time in his adult life, Lucas Bennett did not know what he was going to do next. Every instinct, every principle he had built his business on, told him to proceed with the foreclosure. The Hayes family's circumstances were tragic, certainly. But tragedy did not pay mortgages. Emotion was not a substitute for business strategy. He had not become successful by making exceptions or letting personal feelings dictate decisions that should be based purely on financial analysis. But he could not stop thinking about Jasmine's face, exhausted but dignified, fighting to protect her children with nothing but determination and the slim hope that someone might show her mercy. He could not stop seeing Tyler's protective stance, a boy barely into double digits already trying to be the man of the house because his father was gone. He could not forget Cameron's uncertain smile, a child caught between innocence and the growing awareness that his family was in danger, and Maya, with her bright eyes and her absolute faith that a crayon drawing could make everything better, because her mother had taught her that kindness mattered and that the best gifts were the ones you made yourself. Lucas pulled out his phone and called Rachel. "I need you to pull every document we have on the Queen's property," he said without preamble. "Financial records, payment history, everything, and schedule a meeting with the legal team for tomorrow morning, first thing." Rachel's voice was carefully neutral when she replied, "Of course." "Can I ask what you're planning?" Lucas looked out the window at the rain-slicked streets of Queens giving way to the towers of Manhattan. "Not yet," he said. "Just set up the meeting." He ended the call and leaned back against the seat, closing his eyes. He did not know what he was planning. He only knew that he could not go through with evicting Jasmine Hayes and her children, not without at least exploring alternatives, not without trying to find some way to help that would not completely abandon his business principles. The fact that he was even considering such a thing should have alarmed him. Lucas Bennett did not do favors. Lucas Bennett did not let sentiment interfere with business. Lucas Bennett had built an empire on the foundation of emotional detachment and ruthless efficiency. But Lucas Bennett had also spent his 12th through 18th years bouncing between foster homes, never wanted, never truly seen, always aware that he was just a check from the state and a temporary inconvenience to be tolerated. He remembered what it felt like to lose everything in an instant when his parents' car had hit black ice on a bridge upstate and plunged into the freezing water below. He remembered being shuffled into the foster system with nothing but a garbage bag containing a few clothes and the numb realization that no one was coming to save him. He had vowed then that he would never be powerless again, that he would build wealth and success as armor against the cruelty of a world that could take everything from you without warning. And he had kept that vow ruthlessly, single-mindedly, until a 5-year-old girl had handed him a drawing and looked at him as if he was someone who mattered, someone who could be trusted to do the right thing. The rest of that day passed in a blur of meetings and phone calls, Lucas going through the motions of his work, while his mind remained fixated on the Hayes family and the decision he needed to make. That evening, alone in his penthouse apartment with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, Lucas poured himself a scotch he did not drink and stood staring out at the glittering city below. His apartment was as impersonal as his office, all clean lines and expensive furniture that looked like it belonged in a magazine spread rather than a home where someone actually lived. There were no photographs, no personal touches, no sign that anyone inhabited this space beyond using it as a place to sleep between work sessions. It was exactly the kind of environment Lucas had thought he wanted, controlled, elegant, entirely his own, with no complications or emotional entanglements. But standing there in the silence, looking out over millions of lights representing millions of lives, Lucas felt the hollowness of his existence in a way he had successfully avoided for years. He pulled Maya's drawing from his jacket pocket, unfolding it carefully on the granite kitchen counter. The crayon heart, the stick figure family, the words, "For Mama," in a child's unsteady hand. He thought about Jasmine standing in her doorway, trembling but refusing to back down, fighting for her children with everything she had. He thought about Tyler positioning himself between his mother and a stranger, ready to protect her even though he was just a boy. He thought about Cameron's gap-toothed smile fading as he sensed danger, and Maya, so certain that kindness was currency enough to solve any problem. Lucas picked up his phone and pulled up Jasmine's file, scrolling through documents he had already read but needed to see again. Jasmine Marie Hayes, age 33, widowed mother of 3. Her husband, Michael Hayes, had been an electrician, well-liked and hard-working according to the background information. killed 2 years ago when scaffolding collapsed at a construction site. The contractor had been found negligent, but the settlement was still tied up in litigation with no resolution in sight. Jasmine had worked as an accountant for a small firm until they downsized last year, and she had been scrambling to find work ever since, taking temp jobs and freelance bookkeeping gigs to keep food on the table. She had never missed a mortgage payment until 8 months ago when she lost her job. Even then, she had been trying, making partial payments when she could, calling the bank to negotiate, doing everything possible to avoid foreclosure. The property had been purchased 11 years ago by Michael and Jasmine Hayes. They had put down 20% and made payments steadily and on time until Michael's death. After that, the payments became irregular, sometimes late, sometimes only partial, but Jasmine had kept trying until the money simply ran out. The house was worth approximately $280,000 in its current condition, maybe $320 with proper repairs and updates. The remaining mortgage balance was $168,000. For Bennett Realty Group, it was barely a rounding error in quarterly revenues. For Jasmine Hayes, it was everything. Lucas closed the file and set down his phone, rubbing his temples. He walked to the window and looked out over the park, the trees dark against the ambient glow of the city. Somewhere out there, in a small house in Queens, 3 children were probably doing homework at a kitchen table while their mother tried to figure out how to keep their world from falling apart. Somewhere out there was a woman who had called his office a dozen times, begging for extensions, who had stood in her doorway in the rain and pleaded for 1 more month, who had watched her 5-year-old daughter hand a crayon drawing to the man who held the power to destroy her family's security. And that man, the one who was supposed to be merciless and calculating, who had built his entire identity on emotional detachment, could not stop thinking about them. At 2 in the morning, unable to sleep, Lucas did something he had not done in years. He called someone for a reason that had nothing to do with business. He scrolled through his contacts until he found Jasmine's phone number listed in the property file. His thumb hovered over the call button, while his rational mind screamed that this was inappropriate, unprofessional, a breach of the boundaries that should exist between a developer and a tenant facing foreclosure. But he pressed the button anyway. The phone rang twice, 3 times, and Lucas was about to hang up when a sleepy, cautious voice answered. "Hello?" "Mrs. Hayes," Lucas said, his voice rougher than he intended. "This is Lucas Bennett. I apologize for calling so late." There was a pause, and when Jasmine spoke again, her voice was more alert, tinged with alarm. "Mr. Bennett, is something wrong? Did something happen?" Lucas closed his eyes, mentally cursing himself for calling in the middle of the night and frightening her. "No, nothing's wrong. I've been reviewing your case, and I wanted to let you know that I've made a decision." Another pause, longer this time. Then Jasmine's voice came back, very quiet. "At 2 in the morning?" Despite everything, Lucas felt the corner of his mouth twitch in something that might have been a smile. "I don't sleep much." He heard what might have been a soft laugh, quickly stifled. "Neither do I." Lucas walked to the window, looking out over the sleeping city. "Mrs. Hayes, I've gone through your financial records. Your payment history before your husband's death was impeccable. 11 years without a single late payment." There was a catch in Jasmine's breathing. "Michael was very responsible about bills. He always said that keeping a roof over our children's heads was the most important thing." Lucas felt something twist in his chest. "I can see that, Mrs. Hayes. I'm not going to evict you." The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long that Lucas wondered if the call had dropped. Then he heard Jasmine's sharp intake of breath. "What did you just say?" "I said I'm not going to evict you," Lucas repeated, the words feeling strange in his mouth but also somehow right. "I'm going to find another solution." Jasmine's voice, when she spoke again, was thick with tears barely held back. "I don't understand. Why would you do this? You don't even know us." Lucas pressed his forehead against the cool glass of the window. "Because your daughter gave me a drawing today that reminded me what kindness looks like, and because I remember what it's like to lose everything and have no one show up to help." He heard Jasmine's breath hitch, the sound of someone trying very hard not to break down. "Mr. Bennett, I don't know what to say. This is more than I ever hoped for." "You don't need to say anything," Lucas said quietly. "Just give me a few days to work out the details. I'll be in touch soon with a plan." There was a long pause, and then Jasmine whispered, "Thank you. Thank you so much." After they hung up, Lucas stood at the window for a long time, feeling something fundamental shift inside him. He had just promised to help a woman he barely knew, committed to finding a solution to a problem that should not have been his responsibility, all because a child had given him a crayon drawing and looked at him with trust he did not deserve. His business instincts told him this was foolish, that he was letting emotion cloud his judgment, that he would regret this deviation from his principles. But for the first time in 15 years, Lucas was willing to risk regret if it meant doing something that felt genuinely right. The next morning, Lucas arrived at his office before dawn as usual. But this time, he came with purpose beyond his normal work routine. By the time Rachel arrived at 7:30, he had already drafted a plan and run preliminary financial models. He'd looked up when she entered, and something in his expression must have telegraphed his intentions, because Rachel set down her coffee and pulled out her tablet without preamble. "What do you need?" she asked simply. Lucas handed her a document he had been drafting. "I need you to schedule an emergency meeting with our legal team and our financial advisors. This afternoon, if possible. And I need you to prepare paperwork for a deed transfer." Rachel's eyes widened as she scanned the document. "You're going to pay off the mortgage and transfer the property to her? Lucas, that's over $160,000. "I'm aware of the amount," Lucas said calmly. Rachel set down the tablet and looked at him directly, dropping the professional veneer. "In 7 years of working for you, I have never seen you do anything like this. Not once. What happened at that house yesterday?" Lucas leaned back in his chair, considering how to answer. Finally, he said simply, "I met them. I saw what it looks like when someone is trying desperately to hold their family together with nothing but willpower and hope. And I remembered what it felt like to be 12 years old with nowhere to go and no one who cared." Rachel's expression softened. "So you're going to save them?" Lucas shook his head. "I'm going to give them a chance. What they do with it is up to them." Rachel nodded slowly, then picked up her tablet again. "The board is going to have questions. This isn't exactly standard operating procedure." Lucas met her eyes steadily. "This is my company. My decision. The board can question it if they want, but ultimately this falls under my discretionary authority." Rachel smiled slightly. "You know what? I think this is the first time in 7 years that I've seen you make a decision based on something other than profit margins." She started toward the door, then paused and looked back. "For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing." After she left, Lucas sat alone in his office, staring at the plan he had laid out. He would pay off the remaining mortgage balance in full, transfer the deed to Jasmine Hayes free and clear, and absorb the loss as a charitable donation for tax purposes. It was a drop in the bucket for Bennett Realty Group's annual revenues, but for the Hayes family, it would mean everything. They would own their home outright, no more payments, no more fear of foreclosure, a stable foundation from which Jasmine could rebuild their financial security. Over the next 3 days, Lucas threw himself into making the plan a reality. He met with lawyers to draft the deed transfer documents, ensuring everything was legally sound and that there would be no complications down the line. He consulted with his financial team about the tax implications and how to structure the transaction. He personally reviewed every line of paperwork, checking for errors or ambiguities that might cause problems later. And through it all, he found his mind returning constantly to the Hayes family, wondering how they were doing, whether Jasmine had found work yet, whether the children understood what had almost happened to them. On the fourth day, Lucas drove back to Queens with a folder full of documents that would change the Hayes family's life. This time the sky was clear, autumn sunlight filtering through the trees of Willow Avenue and painting everything in shades of gold. The house at 247 looked different in good weather, still worn but somehow more alive. Fresh chalk drawings covered the sidewalk in front, elaborate scenes of rainbows and stick-figure families and lopsided suns. The tricycle had been moved to the porch, now sitting upright with its handlebars straightened. Someone had swept the leaves from the front steps and put out a new welcome mat decorated with autumn leaves. The flower boxes had been tended, the drooping mums supplemented with what looked like ornamental kale. Lucas parked at the curb and sat for a moment, looking at these small signs of a family trying to make their home beautiful despite everything. Then he picked up the folder, got out of the car, and walked to the front door. This time, when he knocked, he did not have to wait long. Jasmine opened the door wearing jeans and a green sweater, her hair down around her shoulders, and for a moment Lucas forgot what he had come to say. She was beautiful in the afternoon light, and the exhaustion he had seen 4 days ago had eased slightly, replaced by cautious hope. "Mr. Bennett," she said, surprise and apprehension mingling in her voice, "please, come in." Lucas stepped into the house for the first time, taking in details he had only glimpsed from the doorway. The living room was small but cozy, furniture clearly second-hand but well-maintained, everything arranged to maximize the limited space. Bookshelves made from boards and cinder blocks lined one wall, packed with children's books and adult novels and photo albums. The couch was covered with a colorful throw blanket that looked handmade, and the coffee table held a vase of wildflowers someone had picked from the yard. The walls were covered with framed photographs and children's artwork, a visual history of this family's life together. Lucas could see into the kitchen beyond, where the 3 children sat at a small table doing what appeared to be homework. Tyler was helping Cameron sound out words in a reader, patient and encouraging. Maya was coloring with intense concentration, her tongue sticking out slightly. When she caught sight of Lucas, her face lit up with recognition. "You came back!" she shrieked, abandoning her crayons and running over to him. "Did you keep my picture? Did you like it?" Lucas found himself kneeling down to her level without conscious thought. "I loved it," he said honestly. "In fact, I've been keeping it with me." Maya beamed with satisfaction. "I told Mama you would. Cameron said you probably threw it away, but I knew you wouldn't." From the kitchen, Cameron's voice called out in protest. "I did not say that." Jasmine placed a gentle hand on Maya's shoulder. "Sweetheart, Mr. Bennett and I need to talk about grown-up things. Why don't you go finish your coloring?" Maya looked like she wanted to argue, but she nodded and skipped back to the kitchen. Tyler had appeared in the doorway, his expression wary and protective as always. "Is everything okay, Mom?" "Everything's fine, baby," Jasmine assured him. "Go ahead and keep helping your brother with his reading. I'll be right here in the living room if you need me." Tyler hesitated, clearly not wanting to leave his mother alone with the man who had the power to take their home away, but he eventually nodded and returned to the kitchen. Jasmine gestured to the couch. "Please, sit down. Can I get you something to drink? Water? Coffee?" Lucas shook his head as he sat, the worn couch more comfortable than he expected. "I'm fine, thank you." Jasmine settled into the chair across from him, hands clasped tightly in her lap, back straight, despite the obvious anxiety radiating from her. "You said you'd made a decision," she prompted quietly. Lucas opened the folder and pulled out the first document, sliding it across the coffee table. "Mrs. Hayes, as I mentioned on the phone, I've spent the past few days reviewing your situation thoroughly. The current mortgage balance on this property is $168,000. You're 8 months behind on payments, which under normal circumstances would lead to foreclosure and eviction." Jasmine nodded, her face paling slightly. "I understand." Lucas pulled out the second document. "However, I don't believe these are normal circumstances. This morning, Bennett Realty Group paid off your mortgage in full. This house now belongs to you, free and clear. No more payments, no debt, it's yours." Jasmine stared at him without comprehension, her mouth opening and closing without producing sound. Finally, she managed to whisper, "I don't understand what you're saying." Lucas tapped the deed transfer. "As of 9 this morning, you own this house outright. I've had the paperwork filed with the county. The deed is in your name. You'll receive official confirmation in the mail within a week, but I wanted to give you these copies today so you'd know immediately." Jasmine looked down at the documents as if they might be written in a foreign language. Her hands were shaking as she picked up the deed transfer, reading it slowly, her eyes filling with tears that spilled over and ran down her cheeks. "Why?" she finally asked, looking up at Lucas with an expression of complete bewilderment. "Why would you do this for us? We're nobody to you." Lucas thought about all the answers he could give, the business-like explanations about tax deductions and corporate social responsibility. But sitting in this small living room, surrounded by evidence of a family's love and struggle, he found himself giving the only answer that mattered. "Because your daughter handed me a drawing and reminded me that there's more to life than profit margins. Because I know what it's like to have nowhere to go and no one who cares enough to help. And because I have the resources to make sure you and your children are safe, so that's what I'm going to do." Jasmine covered her mouth with her hand, sobbing quietly. From the kitchen, Tyler appeared again in the doorway, alarm crossing his face when he saw his mother crying. "Mom, what's wrong? What did he do?" Jasmine looked up at her oldest son, tears streaming down her face but smiling through them. "Nothing's wrong, baby." "Nothing's wrong. We get to stay. The house is ours. We don't have to leave." Tyler's eyes widened. "What? How?" Jasmine gestured at Lucas with a trembling hand. "Mr. Bennett paid off the mortgage. He gave us the house." Tyler stared at Lucas with an expression that cycled through disbelief, hope, and finally something like awe. "You mean we really get to stay? This is really our home?" Lucas met the boy's eyes. "This is really your home. No one is going to take it away from you ever again." The change that came over Tyler was immediate and profound. His shoulders, which had been carrying the weight of adult worries for far too long, finally relaxed, his jaw unclenched. For the first time since Lucas had met him, Tyler looked like what he was, an 11-year-old child who no longer had to be the man of the house. Cameron appeared beside his brother, having clearly been eavesdropping. "Does that mean we don't have to move? We don't have to leave our school?" Jasmine pulled both boys close, laughing and crying at the same time. "We don't have to move! We get to stay right here." Cameron let out a whoop of joy and ran back into the kitchen to tell Maya, who immediately shrieked with delight, even though Lucas doubted she fully understood what was happening. Within seconds, all 3 children were clustered around Jasmine, hugging her and each other, their voices overlapping in excitement and relief. Lucas watched this reunion with something warm and unfamiliar expanding in his chest. This was what he had given them, not just a house, but security and stability and the promise of a future they had thought was slipping away. Tyler pulled away from his mother and walked over to Lucas with purpose. For a moment, Lucas thought the boy might be angry or suspicious of the sudden turn of fortune. But instead, Tyler extended his hand formally. "Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Thank you for saving our home." Lucas shook the offered hand, struck by the solemnity and maturity in one so young. "You're welcome, Tyler." Then Maya was there, throwing her small arms around Lucas's waist in an enthusiastic hug. "You're the bestest person ever," she declared with absolute certainty. "Can you stay for dinner? Mama makes really good spaghetti." Jasmine wiped her eyes and started to protest. "Maya, honey, Mr. Bennett is a very busy man. He probably needs to get back to his office." But Lucas found himself saying, "Actually, I'd love to stay for dinner if the invitation is genuine." The look of surprise and pleasure on Jasmine's face made the decision feel right. "Of course it's genuine. We'd be honored to have you. Dinner will be ready in about an hour." The next hour was unlike anything Lucas had experienced in his adult life. He found himself sitting at the kitchen table, helping Cameron with math homework, while Jasmine cooked and Tyler set the table, and Maya chattered non-stop about everything from her kindergarten class to her stuffed rabbit to her favorite color, which changed 3 times during the conversation. "See, you have to add these numbers together," Lucas explained to Cameron, pointing to a worksheet of addition problems. "So, if you have 7 apples and you get 3 more, how many do you have?" Cameron's face scrunched up in concentration as he counted on his fingers. 10? Lucas smiled. "Exactly right. You're good at this." Cameron beamed with pride and moved on to the next problem with renewed confidence. Maya appeared at Lucas's elbow with her coloring book and a fistful of crayons. "Will you color with me?" she asked, already pulling out a page showing a princess and a castle. "Mama says I should practice staying inside the lines, but I think it's prettier when the colors mix together." "Sometimes the best art happens when you don't follow all the rules," Lucas found himself saying, accepting a purple crayon and carefully coloring a section of the castle wall. Maya giggled and began coloring the princess's dress in a wild combination of pink, orange, and green. "You're funny. Mama said you were a serious businessman, but you're actually nice." Jasmine glanced over from the stove where she was stirring sauce, her expression soft. "Maya, don't pester Mr. Bennett. I'm sure he's not used to being put to work as soon as he walks in the door." But Lucas discovered that he did not mind at all. There was something deeply appealing about the cheerful chaos of the Hayes household, so different from the sterile silence of his penthouse. Here, life was happening in all its messy, loud, loving glory. Homework and coloring and dinner preparations all happening simultaneously, children's voices overlapping, the warm smell of cooking food filling the air. It felt like a home in ways his expensive apartment never had and never could. Dinner was served family-style at the small kitchen table, somehow accommodating all 5 of them with judicious rearranging of chairs. The meal was simple but delicious: spaghetti with meat sauce, garlic bread that Jasmine had made herself, a green salad, and lemonade for the children. Lucas could not remember the last time he had eaten a home-cooked meal at a family table, and he found himself savoring not just the food, but the entire experience. The children talked over each other, sharing stories from school and arguing good-naturedly about whose turn it was to choose the weekend movie. Jasmine gently redirected them when the noise level got too high, reminding them about table manners and encouraging Maya to use her fork instead of her fingers. Through it all, Lucas felt a sense of rightness that he could not fully explain, as if he had been walking through a desert of his own making for years and had suddenly stumbled into an oasis. "So, Mr. Bennett," Jasmine said, passing him more garlic bread even though he insisted he was full, "what made you decide to go into real estate?" It was the kind of polite dinner party question people asked without expecting a profound answer, but Lucas found himself wanting to give her the truth. When I was younger, I didn't have a stable home. I moved around constantly after my parents died, and I learned that having a place that's truly yours, where you feel safe and can put down roots, is one of the most important things a person can have. I wanted to work in an industry where I could help create that for other people. It was not quite the whole truth, which was that he had wanted to build wealth as armor against ever being powerless again, but it was true enough. Jasmine studied him with those perceptive eyes. So you wanted to give other people the security you didn't have. That's admirable. Lucas shrugged uncomfortably, not used to discussing his motivations. I lost sight of that original purpose somewhere along the way. Profit became the goal instead of the means. Jasmine's voice was gentle when she replied, "It sounds like you're trying to find your way back to it. I think that's a good place to be." After dinner, the children insisted on showing Lucas their rooms, despite Jasmine's protests that he had probably seen enough for one evening. Tyler's room was small but carefully organized, with posters of basketball players covering the walls and a bookshelf packed with sports biographies and adventure novels. Cameron's room was a cheerful explosion of toys and art projects in various states of completion, every surface covered with creations. And Maya's room was a pastel wonderland of stuffed animals and dress-up clothes and drawings taped to every available wall space. "This is Mr. Hops," Maya said solemnly, holding up her worn stuffed rabbit. "Daddy gave him to me when I was a baby. He helps me not be scared at night." Lucas knelt down beside her. "He looks like a very brave rabbit." Maya nodded seriously. "He is. Sometimes I have bad dreams about Daddy, and sometimes I worry that Mama will go away too. But Mr. Hops reminds me that we're all still together, and that's what matters." The simple honesty of her fear pierced Lucas's heart. He understood that fear intimately, the terror of losing the people you loved without warning, the way loss could haunt your dreams and make you afraid to trust happiness. "Your Mama loves you very much," Lucas said gently. "And she's not going anywhere. She's strong and smart, and she's going to take care of you for a very long time." Maya looked up at him with those wide, trusting eyes. "But what if something bad happens like what happened to Daddy?" Lucas wished he could promise that nothing bad would ever happen, but he had learned too young that the world did not work that way. Instead he said, "Your Mama has a lot of people who care about her and want to help, and now I'm one of those people. If she ever needs help with anything, she can call me, and I'll be there, I promise." Maya threw her arms around his neck. "Thank you, Lucas. You're like a superhero except without a cape." Lucas held the small girl carefully, overwhelmed by the trust she was placing in him, a stranger who had walked into her life less than a week ago. "I'll try to live up to that," he said quietly. By the time Lucas finally prepared to leave, it was nearly 9 o'clock, and darkness had settled over the neighborhood. Jasmine walked him to the door while the children called out goodbyes from upstairs where they were supposedly getting ready for bed. "Thank you again," Jasmine said, her voice still carrying the weight of emotions too big to fully express. "Not just for the house, though that's more than I ever dreamed anyone would do for us. But thank you for staying for dinner, for spending time with the kids. They really needed this, needed to see that good things can still happen." Lucas found himself reluctant to leave the warmth of the Hayes home for the emptiness of his penthouse. "I enjoyed it. Your children are wonderful." Jasmine smiled. "They liked you too. Tyler whispered to me that you're easier to talk to than he expected. That's high praise from him. He doesn't trust easily anymore." "I don't imagine he's had much reason to trust adults lately," Lucas observed. Jasmine's smile faded slightly. "Michael's death was hard on all of us, but Tyler took it the hardest. He worshipped his father, and when Michael died, Tyler decided he needed to step into that role. I've tried to tell him he's still just a kid and that it's my job to take care of things, but he won't let go of that responsibility." She paused. Maybe now that the house is secure, and he sees that there are people willing to help us, maybe he can start being a child again. Lucas met her eyes in the porch light. Jasmine, I meant what I told Maya. If you need anything at all, I want you to call me. This doesn't end with the deed transfer. I'm here if you need help finding work, if the house needs repairs, whatever comes up. He pulled out his wallet and extracted a business card, writing his personal cell phone number on the back. This is my direct number. Use it. Jasmine took the card, her fingers brushing his briefly. Why are you doing all this? You've already given us so much. Lucas thought about how to answer, about all the years he had spent alone and the unexpected sense of connection he felt with this family. Because I forgot what it feels like to be part of something real, something that matters beyond balance sheets and quarterly earnings. And you reminded me. Jasmine's eyes glistened in the soft light. Well, you're welcome here anytime, Lucas. Our door is always open to you. As Lucas walked back to his car, he heard Maya's voice calling from an upstairs window. Bye, Lucas. Come back soon. He looked up and waved, and Maya waved back enthusiastically, Mr. Hopps's paw waving too. Lucas got in his car and sat there for a moment before starting the engine, looking at the house with its warm lights in the windows and shadows moving inside as Jasmine shepherded her children through their bedtime routine. He had given them their home back free and clear, ended the threat of foreclosure that had been hanging over them like a storm cloud. But they had given him something too, something he had not even known he was missing. A reason to care about more than money and success, a sense of purpose beyond building his business empire, a glimpse of what his life might look like if he let himself need other people and allowed them to need him in return. Over the next several weeks, Lucas found himself returning to the Hayes home far more often than any rational business justification could explain. At first, it was under the pretense of having a contractor evaluate the house for necessary repairs, which turned into a full renovation project that Lucas insisted on funding despite Jasmine's protests. Then it was stopping by to check on the progress of the work, which somehow always seemed to coincide with dinner time. Then it was bringing by groceries or helping Tyler with a school project or taking all 3 children to a movie while Jasmine had a rare afternoon to herself. Lucas told himself he was simply following through on his commitment to help the family get back on their feet, but the truth was simpler and more profound. He wanted to be there. He wanted to hear about Cameron's day at school and help Maya with her reading homework and listen to Tyler talk about his dreams for the future. He wanted to sit on the newly repaired porch with Jasmine in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing while the children played in the yard. He wanted to be part of this family's life in ways that went far beyond philanthropy or social responsibility. Jasmine had found a job within 2 weeks, a position as a senior accountant at a mid-sized firm in Queens that Lucas had quietly recommended her to after verifying her qualifications. She had been cautiously suspicious about how quickly things were falling into place, but Lucas had truthfully assured her that she had earned the position on her own merits. He had simply made sure her resume landed on the right desk at the right time. She thrived in the new role, her confidence returning as financial stability allowed her to stop scrambling day to day and start planning for the future again. With steady income and no mortgage payment, she could afford to buy new clothes for the rapidly growing children, stock the pantry properly, even start saving for emergencies. The perpetual tension Lucas had seen in her shoulders during their first meeting gradually eased, replaced by something approaching peace. One Saturday evening, 6 weeks after Lucas had transferred the deed, he arrived at the house to find an elaborate dinner laid out on the kitchen table. Candles flickered in mismatched holders. The table was set with what was clearly the good china, and something that smelled incredible was baking in the oven. Jasmine answered the door wearing a dress Lucas had not seen before, deep purple and elegant despite its simplicity, and he felt his breath catch. "What's all this?" he asked as she ushered him inside. Jasmine smiled, a real smile that transformed her entire face. "We wanted to thank you properly for everything you've done. So, we're having a celebration dinner, and you're the guest of honor." The children appeared from the kitchen, all three dressed in their nicest clothes and bouncing with barely contained excitement. "We helped make dessert," Cameron announced proudly. "It's chocolate cake with vanilla frosting, and I only got a little bit of eggshell in the batter." Tyler rolled his eyes. "There's no eggshell in it. I picked it all out." Maya tugged on Lucas's hand. "And I made you a card. Come see." She dragged him to the kitchen table, where a construction paper card sat propped against his plate. It was decorated with stickers and glitter glue, and inside, in Maya's careful printing, were the words, "Thank you for being our friend. Love, Maya, Tyler, and Cameron." Lucas felt something warm and tight in his chest as he looked at the card, at this family who had been strangers just weeks ago and who now welcomed him into their home with such genuine affection. Dinner was filled with laughter and stories, the children competing for Lucas's attention with tales from school and elaborate plans for an upcoming field trip to the Science Museum. Jasmine watched with amusement as Lucas listened attentively to each child, asking questions and offering suggestions with a patience that clearly came naturally to him, despite his claims that he knew nothing about children. After dinner, while the children insisted on showing Lucas their latest school projects, Jasmine cleared the table and brought out the chocolate cake Cameron had mentioned. It was slightly lopsided, and the frosting had been applied with more enthusiasm than skill, but it was one of the most beautiful cakes Lucas had ever seen because it represented this family's love and effort. They sang happy birthday even though it was no one's birthday, just because Maya insisted every celebration needed singing, and Lucas blew out candles he had not asked for while three children and their mother cheered. Later, after the children had finally been persuaded to go to bed, despite their protests that it was Saturday and therefore bedtime rules should not apply, Lucas helped Jasmine clean up the kitchen. They worked in comfortable silence, passing dishes and wiping counters with the ease of people who had done this together many times. When the last dish was dried and put away, Jasmine poured 2 glasses of wine and led Lucas out to the front porch, where the evening air was cool and filled with the scent of autumn leaves. They sat on the porch swing Lucas had installed 2 weeks earlier as part of the renovation work, and for a long moment neither spoke, content to simply be in each other's company. "The kids are getting really attached to you," Jasmine finally said, her voice thoughtful. "Tyler talks about you constantly. He wants to know about real estate development, about how you built your business, about what it takes to be successful. Cameron follows you around like a puppy whenever you're here, soaking up attention. And Maya has started telling everyone at kindergarten that Lucas is her special friend." She paused. "I just want to make sure you understand the impact you're having on them. They've already lost their father. If you're going to be in their lives, I need to know you're serious about it, that you're not going to disappear." Lucas turned to face her, understanding the protectiveness beneath the gentle words. "Jasmine, I'm not going anywhere. These past weeks with you and your children have meant more to me than you know. I'm not just some wealthy guy doing charity work to assuage his conscience. This has become personal." Jasmine searched his face in the dim porchlight. "Personal how?" Lucas took a breath, knowing this was the moment to be honest about what he was feeling, even though putting it into words made him vulnerable in ways he had avoided for years. "I've spent my entire adult life alone by choice. After my parents died and I went through the foster system, I decided that needing people was dangerous, that caring about anyone just gave them the power to hurt you. So I built walls and focused on success and convinced myself that I was fine with being solitary. But being here with your family, I've realized I wasn't fine. I was just surviving, not really living. He continued, "You and your children have shown me what I've been missing. The noise and chaos and love of a real home, the feeling of someone genuinely being happy to see you, the sense that you matter to people not because of what you can do for them, but just because of who you are. I don't want to go back to the way things were before. I don't want to be alone anymore." Jasmine's eyes had filled with tears. "Lucas, I don't know what to say. This is all happening so fast." Lucas nodded. "I know, and I'm not asking you to rush into anything or make any promises. I just needed you to know that I'm serious about being in your lives, about being here for the long term, not just until the next interesting project comes along." They sat in silence for a moment, the swing moving gently back and forth. Then Jasmine said softly, "I should probably tell you that it's not just the kids who are getting attached." Lucas's heart sped up. "No." Jasmine shook her head, a small smile playing at her lips. "No. You've been so kind and patient, so good with my children, and so thoughtful about everything. You make me laugh. You make me feel safe in ways I haven't felt since Michael died, and you show up consistently and reliably, which is more valuable than you might realize." She took a breath. "I'm falling for you, Lucas Bennett, and that terrifies me because I swore after Michael died that I would never let myself be that vulnerable again. But here we are, and I can't seem to help it." Lucas reached over and took her hand, marveling at how right it felt. "I'm terrified too. Everything I've built my life on tells me that letting someone matter this much is a mistake. But being with you doesn't feel like a mistake. It feels like coming home." Jasmine squeezed his hand. "So what do we do now?" Lucas smiled. "I guess we figure it out together. Take it slowly, give the kids time to adjust, and see where this goes." Jasmine leaned her head on his shoulder. "I like the sound of that." The relationship that developed between Lucas and Jasmine over the following months was unlike anything either of them had experienced before. They moved carefully, aware of the children, and the weight of Jasmine's grief and Lucas's inexperience with intimacy. But the foundation they built was solid, rooted in genuine friendship and mutual respect, before ever becoming romance. Lucas continued coming to dinner several times a week, but now there were subtle changes. The way Jasmine would lean into him when they sat together on the porch. The way Lucas would help clean up after meals, and their hands would linger when they passed dishes. The way they would steal quiet moments together in the kitchen while the children did homework, standing close and talking in low voices about their days. The children noticed, of course. Tyler started watching Lucas more carefully, his protective instincts on alert. Cameron made jokes about Lucas and his mom sitting together on the couch. And Maya, with the blunt honesty of 5-year-olds, asked outright if Lucas was going to be their new daddy. That particular question came one evening when Lucas was reading Maya her bedtime story, a routine that had somehow become his responsibility during his visits. Maya was snuggled against his side, with Mr. Hops tucked under one arm, listening to the adventures of a brave princess, when she suddenly interrupted. "Lucas, are you going to marry Mama and be our dad?" Lucas carefully closed the book, his heart pounding. "That's a pretty big question, Maya." "What makes you ask?" Maya shrugged with the casual manner of children discussing profound topics. "Because you're here all the time, and you make Mama smile a lot, and you help us with homework and play games with us. That's what dads do." She looked up at him with those wide, trusting eyes. "Our real dad died and went to heaven, so we need a new dad to help Mama take care of us." Lucas swallowed hard, trying to find the right words. "Your real dad will always be your dad, Maya. No one can replace him. But if your mom and I did decide to get married someday, I would try very hard to be someone you could trust and depend on. Would that be okay with you?" Maya considered this seriously. "Would we still get to call you Lucas, Or would we have to call you Dad? Lucas smiled despite the emotion tightening his throat. You could call me whatever feels right to you. There's no rule that says it has to be one or the other. Maya nodded, apparently satisfied with this answer. Okay. I think I would call you Dad Lucas. That way I can have two dads. She settled back against him. Can you finish the story now? I want to know if the princess defeats the dragon. That night, after Lucas had finished the story and tucked Maya in, he found Tyler waiting in the hallway with an expression that was far too serious for an 11-year-old. Can I talk to you? Tyler asked quietly. Lucas nodded, and they sat on the stairs together, the house quiet around them. I heard what Maya asked you, Tyler said without preamble, about marrying Mom and being our dad. Lucas had expected this conversation to happen eventually, though he was not sure he was prepared for it. What she asked was pretty straightforward. Is there something you want to ask me? Tyler looked down at his hands. Are you serious about Mom? Like, really serious? Because she's been through a lot, and I don't want her to get hurt again, and my brothers and sister, they're already attached to you. If you're just going to leave eventually, it would be better if you left now before they get more attached. The protective fierceness in Tyler's voice made Lucas respect the boy even more. I am absolutely serious about your mom, Lucas said firmly, and about all of you. I know it's hard to trust that after everything you've been through, but I'm not going anywhere. I love your mother and I care about you and Cameron and Maya more than I thought it was possible to care about anyone. Tyler looked up, searching Lucas's face. Do you really love her? You're not just saying that. Lucas met the boy's eyes steadily. I really love her. I've never said that to anyone before your mother, so yes, I mean it. Tyler was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, If you married Mom, would that make you our stepdad? Lucas nodded. That's how it would work, yes. Tyler processed this. Would you want to be? Like, officially? Or would you just be Mom's husband and we'd be sort of extra? Lucas felt his chest tighten at the vulnerability beneath Tyler's careful words. He put his hand on the boy's shoulder. Tyler, you would never be extra to me. If I'm fortunate enough to marry your mother, I would want to be your father in every way that matters. I would want to be there for school events and basketball games and homework help and all the big moments and small ones. I would want to be someone you could count on, someone who shows up no matter what. Tyler's eyes had gotten suspiciously bright. Even though we're not actually related by blood? Lucas pulled the boy into a hug. Family isn't just about blood, Tyler. It's about choosing to show up for each other every day. And I choose you. I choose all of you. Tyler held on tight for a moment before pulling back and wiping his eyes quickly. Okay, just so you know, if you hurt Mum, I'll be really mad at you. Despite the serious moment, Lucas almost smiled. That's fair. I would expect nothing less. A few weeks later, Lucas took the monumental step of asking all three children if they would be okay with him proposing to their mother. He took them out for lunch at the diner they loved, buying them milkshakes and burgers and waiting until they were relaxed and comfortable before broaching the subject. I want to ask your mum to marry me, he said without preamble once the food was finished. 3 pairs of eyes fixed on him with varying degrees of surprise and excitement. But before I do that, I need to know if it's okay with you. This isn't just about your mom and me. It's about all of us becoming a family together, and I wouldn't feel right moving forward without your blessing. Maya bounced in her seat so enthusiastically she nearly knocked over her milkshake. Yes, yes, yes. Can I be the flower girl, and can I wear a sparkly dress? Cameron grinned around his straw. That would be so cool. Would you live with us then? Would you be there every day? Lucas nodded. That's the idea, yes. I would move in with you and be part of your everyday lives, not just someone who visits. Both younger children seemed completely on board with this plan, but Lucas noticed Tyler had gone quiet, his expression thoughtful. "Tyler, what do you think?" Lucas asked gently. "Is there something about this that worries you?" Tyler looked down at his hands, fidgeting with his napkin. Finally, he said, "If you marry Mom and become our stepdad, would you want us to call you Dad?" Lucas considered his response carefully. "That would be completely up to you. You can call me whatever feels comfortable, whether that's Lucas or Dad or something else entirely. There's no pressure to call me Dad if you're not ready for that." Tyler nodded slowly. "What if I'm not sure yet? Like, what if I want to keep calling you Lucas for a while, but maybe someday call you Dad when it feels right?" Lucas felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Then that's exactly what you should do. There's no timeline or requirement. You take whatever time you need." Tyler looked up, his eyes too old for his age. "I miss my real dad every single day, but I also really want you to marry Mum because you make her happy and you're good to us. It just feels weird thinking about having a new dad, even though I know you're not trying to replace him." Lucas reached across the table and took Tyler's hand. "Your real dad will always be your dad, Tyler. I'm not trying to take his place. I just want to be someone else who loves you and your family and wants to help take care of you." Tyler's eyes filled with tears he was clearly trying not to let fall. "Dad used to say that real men show up for their families no matter what. And you've been showing up for us even though you didn't have to. I think he would like you." Lucas had to blink back his own tears. "That means more to me than you know." Maya reached over and patted Lucas's arm. "Don't cry, Dad Lucas. Happy things shouldn't make people cry." Cameron nodded agreement. "Yeah, this is supposed to be exciting. We're going to be a real family again." Tyler wiped his eyes and managed a small smile. "So I guess this means it's okay with us if you ask Mom to marry you." Lucas smiled back. "Thank you, all of you. This means everything." The proposal itself took weeks to plan. Lucas worked with the children to create something that would be meaningful and romantic without being over the top. Maya insisted on making decorations, producing an endless supply of paper hearts and flowers in every color imaginable. Cameron suggested taking Jasmine to her favorite restaurant, the Italian place she had mentioned wanting to try but had never been able to afford. Tyler helped Lucas pick out the ring, accompanying him to jeweler after jeweler until they found the perfect one. A delicate solitaire diamond on a white gold band, elegant and understated like Jasmine herself. Through all the planning, Lucas felt a mixture of excitement and terror, unlike anything he had experienced before. He had faced down rival developers, negotiated million-dollar deals, built an empire from nothing, but asking Jasmine Hayes to marry him felt like the biggest, most important thing he had ever done. The day finally arrived in mid-February, just before Valentine's Day. Lucas had arranged for Jasmine's sister, who lived about 2 hours away, to take the children for the weekend, framing it as a special cousins' bonding trip. Jasmine had been touched by this thoughtful gesture, thinking Lucas was simply giving her a rare, child-free evening to relax. She had no idea what was actually coming. That morning, Lucas arrived early with coffee and pastries, finding the household in its usual state of weekend chaos. Tyler was packed and ready, sitting on the couch reading. Cameron was running around looking for his favorite shoes. Maya was insisting that Mr. Hops needed his own suitcase because he got scared in dark spaces. Jasmine was trying to coordinate everything while simultaneously packing snacks for the road trip, and she looked up when Lucas entered, with relief clear on her face. "Thank goodness you're here," she said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "I swear these children are trying to make me lose my mind before 9 in the morning." Lucas smiled and knelt down in front of Maya. "Mr. Hops is very brave, remember. I bet he won't mind sharing your suitcase just this once." Maya considered this with her usual seriousness. "Well, maybe just this once. but he gets to sit on top so he can see out. Problem solved, Maya ran off to finish packing. Cameron found his missing shoe under the couch, and Tyler helped him get everything organized. When Jasmine went upstairs to get something, the three children gathered around Lucas with conspiratorial excitement. "Are you nervous?" Cameron whispered. "Terrified," Lucas admitted. Maya threw her arms around him in a quick hug. "She's going to say yes." "I know she will because she loves you." Tyler clapped him on the shoulder with surprising maturity. "Good luck, Lucas. You've got this." An hour later, Jasmine's sister arrived to collect the children, and after a flurry of hugs and reminders about behavior and promises to call if anything went wrong, the kids were gone and the house fell into sudden silence. Jasmine closed the door and leaned against it with a happy sigh. "I love my children more than life itself, but there is something to be said for a quiet house." Lucas smiled, his heart already starting to pound with anticipation of what was coming. "I made reservations at that Italian restaurant you've been wanting to try. For 7 o'clock tonight." Jasmine's face lit up. "Really?" "Lucas, that place is expensive. You don't have to." Lucas crossed to her and took her hands. "I want to. Let me take you on a proper date, just the two of us." Jasmine smiled and stood on her toes to kiss him softly. "Then I should probably go figure out what to wear. Give me a couple of hours to make myself presentable." As she headed upstairs, Lucas called after her. "Jasmine, you're always beautiful, but I'm looking forward to seeing what you pick out." That evening, when Jasmine came downstairs in a wine-colored dress that Lucas had never seen before, her hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders, he felt his breath catch. She was absolutely stunning, and the fact that she was his, that she had chosen to let him into her life and her heart despite everything she had been through, made him feel like the luckiest man alive. The restaurant was intimate and romantic, with candlelight and soft Italian music and the smell of garlic and fresh bread filling the air. They ordered wine and appetizers, falling into the easy conversation that had become natural to them over the past months. They talked about Jasmine's work, and a funny thing Cameron had said that morning, and plans for Tyler's upcoming birthday. Every moment felt precious, weighted with the knowledge of what was coming, even though Jasmine had no idea. After dinner, as they shared tiramisu, Jasmine reached across the table and took Lucas's hand. "This has been perfect. Thank you for such a lovely evening." Lucas squeezed her hand gently. "It's not over yet. I thought we could take a walk if you're up for it." Jasmine glanced down at her heels with amusement. "In these shoes?" "You're an optimist." Lucas laughed. "Just a short walk, I promise." He paid the check, and they stepped out into the cool February evening. The sky was clear, stars visible despite the city lights, and the air smelled of early spring. Lucas led Jasmine down the street to a small park nearby, one with paths lit by old-fashioned lampposts and benches overlooking a pond. "I used to come here sometimes," Lucas said as they walked hand in hand. "When I first started my company and everything felt impossible, I would sit on one of these benches and try to figure out what I was doing with my life." "And did you ever figure it out?" Jasmine asked. Lucas stopped walking and turned to face her, still holding her hand. "Not until I met you." He led her to a bench overlooking the pond where moonlight reflected off the still water. "Can we sit for a minute?" Jasmine nodded, curiosity starting to replace the contentment on her face. They sat down, and Lucas turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. His heart was pounding so hard he was sure she must be able to hear it. "Jasmine, 10 months ago I came to your house to evict you. It was supposed to be a simple business transaction. I was supposed to serve the papers, clear the property and move on to the next deal like I always did. But then you opened the door and your daughter handed me a crayon drawing and something inside me cracked open. You and your children showed me that I had been living half a life, succeeding in business while failing at being human. You reminded me what it means to love and be loved, what it means to have a home and a family, and people who matter more than profit margins." He took a breath, his hands trembling slightly. "You have given me everything I didn't know I was missing. You've shown me that it's possible to trust again, to let people matter, to build something real and meaningful, and I don't want to spend another day without you in my life." Lucas reached into his pocket and pulled out the small velvet box, opening it to reveal the ring. Jasmine's eyes went wide, her free hand flying to her mouth. "Jasmine Hayes, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life loving you and being a father to your children and building a family with you?" For a moment that felt like an eternity, Jasmine just stared at him with tears streaming down her face. Then she nodded vigorously, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, yes, of course, yes, I would be honored to marry you." Lucas's hands shook as he slipped the ring onto her finger, and then Jasmine was pulling him close and kissing him while tears ran down both their faces. When they finally broke apart, they were both laughing breathlessly. "I can't believe you did this," Jasmine said, looking at the ring on her finger as if to make sure it was real. "I can't believe you said yes," Lucas replied. "Why wouldn't I?" "Lucas, you saved us. You gave us our home back and helped me find work, and showed my children what it looks like when someone chooses to be there for them. How could I not fall in love with you?" Lucas cupped her face in his hands. "I need you to know that you saved me too. I was so lost and didn't even realize it until you opened that door and let me see what really matters." They sat on that bench for a long time, holding each other, while the moonlight reflected off the pond and the city hummed around them. Finally, Jasmine pulled back slightly with sudden realization. "The children. Did you talk to them about this?" Lucas smiled. "I asked their permission first. I couldn't propose without making sure they were okay with it." Fresh tears spilled down Jasmine's cheeks. What did they say? Lucas told her about his conversation with each child, about Maya's immediate enthusiasm, Cameron's excitement, and Tyler's thoughtful acceptance. By the time he finished, Jasmine was crying again. "You asked Tyler if he wanted to call you Dad," she whispered. "You understand how big that is for him." "I understand that I'm not trying to replace Michael," Lucas said gently. "I'm just trying to be someone else who loves your children and wants to help take care of them. They can call me whatever feels right to them." Jasmine kissed him again, soft and sweet. "Have I mentioned that I love you?" Lucas smiled against her lips. "You might have hinted at it once or twice." They decided to tell the children in person rather than over the phone, making the drive to Jasmine's sister's house despite the late hour. The children were still awake, much to their aunt's exasperation, insisting they had to wait up for something important. When Jasmine and Lucas walked in together, hand in hand, Maya took one look at her mother's glowing face and shrieked, "She said yes! She said yes!" Cameron and Tyler came running, and within seconds, all three children were clustered around their mother, admiring the ring and asking questions and celebrating with the uninhibited joy that only children could express. Tyler hung back slightly, and Lucas noticed despite the chaos. He approached the boy who was watching everything with an expression that held happiness mixed with something more complex. "You good with this?" Lucas asked quietly. Tyler nodded, then suddenly stepped forward and hugged Lucas tight. "Thank you for loving my mom," he whispered. "Thank you for loving all of us." Lucas held the boy close. "Thank you for giving me the chance." When Tyler pulled back, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Does this mean I can call you Dad now if I want to?" Lucas felt his own eyes sting. "You can call me whatever feels right, Tyler. There's no pressure." Tyler considered this, then said with a small smile, I think I'll try out Dad and see how it feels. That okay? Lucas pulled him in for another hug. That's more than okay. That's perfect. The wedding took place 4 months later in June, when the weather was warm and the world was in full bloom. They kept it intimate and personal, just as they both wanted, holding the ceremony in the backyard of the house on Willow Avenue, where everything had changed. The yard had been transformed for the occasion. White chairs arranged in neat rows, an arch covered in climbing roses and ivy at the front, string lights draped between the trees that would glow when evening fell. Tables set up for dinner with white linens and centerpieces of wildflowers Jasmine had picked herself from a nearby meadow. The guest list was small. Jasmine's sister and a few close friends from work, Lucas's business partner Daniel and his family, Rachel Torres, and a handful of other Bennett Realty employees who had become friends over the years. But the real stars of the ceremony were Tyler, Cameron, and Maya, each with special roles they took very seriously. Tyler walked his mother down the aisle with visible pride, his suit pressed perfectly and his shoulders back. At 12 years old now, he took his responsibility of giving away his mother with a solemnity that made several guests reach for tissues. Cameron carried the rings on a small silk pillow, concentrating so hard on not dropping them that his tongue stuck out slightly. And Maya served as flower girl, scattering rose petals with enthusiastic abandon and occasionally stopping to twirl in her pink dress because it had a full skirt that was perfect for spinning. When she reached the front, where Lucas waited, she whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Remember to say the right words. Don't mess up." The guests laughed and Lucas solemnly promised he would try his best. Jasmine looked radiant in an ivory dress that flowed gracefully as she moved, her hair styled in soft curls with small white flowers woven through. She wore the necklace Lucas had given her their first Christmas together, and she carried a bouquet of white roses and lavender. When Lucas saw her walking toward him with Tyler at her side, his breath caught just as it had the first time he saw her in that doorway 10 months ago. But this time, instead of a frightened woman trying desperately to save her home, he saw his future wife, the woman who had changed his entire life by accepting his help and eventually his love. The ceremony was officiated by a minister friend of Jasmine's, a warm woman who had known the family for years and who spoke movingly about love and second chances and the courage it took to open one's heart after loss. When it came time for vows, Lucas went first, speaking without notes because the words came straight from his heart. "Jasmine, when I knocked on your door that day, I was a different man. I was closed off and driven only by ambition and convinced that success meant being alone. But you saw something in me worth saving, just as I saw a family worth fighting for. You taught me what real wealth looks like, not in bank accounts or property holdings, but in moments like this, surrounded by people who love you and choose to be part of your life. You gave me not just your love, but a family. 3 incredible children who have taught me what it means to show up every day and love unconditionally." His voice grew stronger. "I promise to love you through every season, through joy and difficulty and everything in between. I promise to honor Michael's memory by being the best father I can be to Tyler, Cameron, and Maya. I promise to be a partner you can count on, a shoulder to lean on, and a hand to hold when things get hard. And I promise to wake up every single morning grateful that you chose me, grateful that you let me into your life and your heart." By the time he finished, there was not a dry eye among the guests. Jasmine took a breath to steady herself before beginning her own vows, her voice wavering but strong. "Lucas, a year ago I thought I had lost everything. I was terrified and exhausted and convinced that the universe had nothing left but hardship for me and my children. But then you walked into my life, and instead of taking away the little we had left, you gave us more than I ever dreamed possible. You showed up not just once, but every day, consistently and reliably, until showing up became such a natural part of our lives that I can't imagine what days were like without you in them." She smiled through her tears. "You loved my children when you had no obligation to love them. You honored my late husband instead of feeling threatened by his memory. You saw me at my absolute lowest, and instead of walking away, you reached out your hand and helped me stand back up. For that, and for 1,000 other kindnesses large and small, I will spend the rest of my life loving you and being grateful that the universe sent you to our door that day." Her voice broke slightly on the last words, and Lucas reached out to squeeze her hand gently. The minister smiled through her own tears and pronounced them husband and wife. And when Lucas pulled Jasmine close to kiss her, sealing their promises in front of their family and friends, the guests erupted in applause and cheers. But before the newly married couple could walk back down the aisle, Lucas turned to the children who stood nearby, watching with joy and pride. "Come here," he said, and Tyler, Cameron, and Maya approached. Lucas knelt down so he was at their level, Jasmine beside him doing the same. "I have something for the three of you," Lucas said, pulling out 3 small boxes from his pocket. The children opened them simultaneously to find matching silver bracelets, each engraved with a word chosen specifically for that child. Tyler's read strength, Cameron's read joy, and Maya's read love. "These are to remind you that you are part of this family not just because of your mom, but because I choose you," Lucas said, his voice thick with emotion. "I choose to be your father, to love you and stand by you for the rest of my life. You are my children now, in every way that matters." Maya immediately threw her arms around Lucas's neck, her small voice declaring, "I love you, Daddy." Cameron hugged him next, followed by Tyler, who whispered, "Thank you, Dad." For everything. The 4 of them stood there wrapped in an embrace while Jasmine cried happy tears and the guests wiped their own eyes and applauded again. This was a family knit together not by blood but by choice and love and the courage to rebuild after loss. The reception that followed was filled with laughter and dancing and joy. Lucas and Jasmine shared their first dance as husband and wife, swaying together while their children and guests watched. Then Lucas danced with Maya, who stood on his feet and giggled the entire time. He danced with Tyler, who was stiff and self-conscious at first, but gradually relaxed. Cameron insisted on a dance too, even though he had no idea what he was doing, and mostly just jumped around while Lucas laughed and tried to follow along. As evening fell and the string lights began to glow against the darkening sky, as dinner was served and toasts were made and cake was cut, Lucas found himself standing at the edge of the yard, watching the celebration unfold. Daniel came to stand beside him with 2 glasses of champagne. "Quite a year you've had," Daniel observed, handing Lucas a glass. "That's putting it mildly," Lucas replied, accepting the drink. Daniel clinked his glass against Lucas's. "I've known you for 16 years, since we were both broke kids trying to get our first real estate deals off the ground, and I have never seen you like this." "Like what?" Lucas asked. "Happy. Genuinely, deeply happy. Like you finally figured out what all the work was for." And Daniel smiled. "She's good for you, Lucas. They all are." Lucas watched Jasmine laugh at something her sister said, watched Tyler teaching Cameron some kind of complicated hand gesture, watched Maya twirling in the grass with another little girl from the neighborhood. "I'm the luckiest man alive," he said quietly. Daniel clapped him on the shoulder. "You earned it, friend. You could have walked away 12 times, but you didn't. You chose this family, and now you get to live with that choice for the rest of your life." Lucas smiled. "Best choice I ever made." Late that night, after the guests had departed and the children were finally asleep upstairs, exhausted from the excitement, Lucas and Jasmine sat together on the porch swing. Jasmine had changed into comfortable clothes, but still wore her wedding rings, which she kept looking at as if to verify they were real. "Mrs. Bennet," Lucas said, testing out the name. Jasmine smiled. I like the sound of that. They swayed gently in the swing, content in the peaceful silence. Can I tell you something? Jasmine asked after a while. Always. A year ago, I was so scared. I genuinely believed we were going to lose everything, that I would fail my children, and they would grow up remembering me as the mom who couldn't keep a roof over their heads. And now look at us. Married, secure, happy. It doesn't feel real sometimes. Lucas pulled her closer. It's real. We're real. And we're going to have an amazing life together. Jasmine rested her head on his shoulder. I know Michael would have liked you. He always said that the measure of a man isn't how much money he makes, but whether he shows up for the people he loves. And you show up, Lucas. Every single day, you show up. Lucas kissed the top of her head. I finally have somewhere worth showing up to. They sat together watching the stars appear one by one in the clear night sky, listening to the sounds of the neighborhood settling in for the night, comfortable in the knowledge that they had built something real and lasting. Eventually, they went inside and checked on the children one more time. Tyler was sprawled across his bed, still in his dress pants, but having managed to remove his shirt and shoes, clearly having fallen asleep mid-undressing. Lucas carefully covered him with a blanket. Cameron was curled up with an army of stuffed animals, snoring softly. And Maya was clutching Mr. Hops, her flower girl dress still on because she had refused to take it off, a smile on her sleeping face. Lucas stood in Maya's doorway for a moment, overwhelmed by the weight of love and responsibility he felt for these 3 children who were now legally his. The adoption papers had been filed weeks ago and would be finalized within the month, making him their father in every legal sense. But he had been their father in the ways that mattered for much longer than that, from the moment he had chosen to stay instead of walking away. From the moment he had let himself love them and be loved in return, Jasmine appeared beside him and slipped her hand into his. "Thank you for loving them," she whispered. "Thank you for being everything they needed." Lucas wrapped his arm around his wife. "Thank you for letting me be part of this family, for giving me a home." They stood there together in the quiet house, listening to the soft sounds of sleeping children. And Lucas felt a peace he had never experienced before. This was home. This was family. This was everything he had been searching for without knowing it, everything that mattered more than success or wealth or the empire he had built. And it had all started with a knock on a door, a desperate mother's plea, and a child's crayon drawing that had cracked open his heart. The years that followed were filled with the ordinary chaos and extraordinary joy of family life. Tyler grew into a confident teenager, excelling at basketball and developing an interest in architecture that made Lucas secretly proud. He started calling Lucas Dad consistently, the word coming naturally now, though Lucas never forgot that Tyler had another father whose memory he honored. Cameron discovered a passion for photography, always carrying a camera and documenting their family's life in thousands of images, and Maya remained the heart of the family, creative and spirited, declaring regularly that she was going to be an artist when she grew up, just like her mum said she could be anything she wanted. 3 years after the wedding, Jasmine gave birth to a baby boy they named Michael Lucas Bennett, honoring both Jasmine's late husband and their own new beginning. Lucas had been terrified about having a biological child, worried that it might create divisions or that the older children would feel displaced, but those fears proved unfounded. Tyler, Cameron, and Maya were thrilled to have a baby brother, fighting over who got to hold him and help with feedings and show him off to their friends. The Bennett family settled into a beautiful rhythm of work and school and meals together and vacations they planned as a unit. Lucas restructured his work schedule to leave the office by 6 every evening, making it home in time for dinner with his family. He attended every basketball game and school play and parent-teacher conference, cheering louder than anyone and beaming with pride at his children's accomplishments. Rachel Torres ran more of the day-to-day operations at Bennett Realty, while Lucas focused on the bigger picture and spent more time with his family. And the company continued to thrive, even without his constant hands-on attention. He had learned that success meant nothing without people to share it with, and he finally understood that leaving work at a reasonable hour to be with his family was not a weakness, but the smartest decision he had ever made. 5 years after that first knock on Jasmine's door, Lucas found himself standing in the backyard of their new house, a larger property in a better neighborhood with room for everyone, and a yard big enough for a swing set and a garden. They had kept the house on Willow Avenue, choosing to rent it to a young family rather than sell, because that house would always be special as the place where everything changed. But this new house was where they were building their future together, where baby Michael would grow up, where the older children would finish school and eventually leave for college and jobs and lives of their own. On this particular Saturday in early autumn, Lucas was hosting a barbecue for both families. The original children, plus Michael, plus Daniel and his family, and Rachel and her husband, and various friends from work and school. The yard was full of noise and laughter, children running around playing tag, while adults stood in clusters, talking and drinking and enjoying the perfect weather. Lucas manned the grill, while Jasmine moved through the crowd with baby Michael on her hip, playing hostess with the grace and warmth that had first attracted Lucas to her. Tyler was teaching the younger kids how to throw a football, patient and encouraging, just like his real father had been. Cameron was taking photographs of everything, capturing moments that would later fill albums and frames throughout the house. And Maya was organizing an elaborate art project at the picnic table, directing the other children with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what vision she wanted to create. Lucas watched all this with profound contentment, marveling at the life he had built. 5 years ago, he had been alone in a penthouse, measuring his worth by his bank balance and his company's growth. Now he was surrounded by family and friends, defined not by what he owned, but by who he loved and who loved him in return. This was true wealth. This was real success. Daniel appeared beside him at the grill, beer in hand and a knowing smile on his face. "You've come a long way from the guy who used to work 18-hour days and sleep in his office," Daniel observed. Lucas flipped a burger and laughed. That guy didn't know what he was missing. He gestured at the scene before them. "This is everything. Everything that matters." Daniel nodded. "You found your purpose, Luke." "Not everyone does." Later that evening, after the guests had departed and the children were bathed and in bed, Lucas and Jasmine sat together on their back porch with glasses of wine, watching the stars come out. "Today was perfect," Jasmine said contentedly. "Thank you for organizing all that." Lucas squeezed her hand. "I like having people around, seeing the house full of life and laughter. It's so different from how I used to live." Jasmine turned to look at him. "Do you ever miss it? The old life, I mean. The freedom to focus entirely on work, the simplicity of only having to think about yourself." Lucas considered the question seriously. "Sometimes I miss the quieter moments, the ability to work late without worrying about getting home for dinner, but miss the loneliness, the emptiness. Never. This life with you and the kids, even with all the chaos and noise and complication, is infinitely better than anything I had before." Jasmine smiled and leaned against him. "I'm glad you knocked on my door that day." Lucas wrapped his arm around her. "I'm glad you opened it." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, content in each other's presence. Finally, Lucas said, "Did I ever tell you about the drawing Maya gave me that first day?" Jasmine laughed softly. "The one you kept?" "She's told everyone about that drawing, how she knew it would make you help us." Lucas pulled out his wallet and opened it, revealing a carefully folded piece of paper that had been laminated to preserve it. I've carried it with me every day since then. Sometimes when I'm having a difficult day or feeling overwhelmed, I look at it and remember what really matters. Jasmine looked at the drawing, the crayon heart and stick figures and childish handwriting declaring, "For Mama," and her eyes filled with tears. She was right to trust you. We all were. Lucas carefully folded the drawing and returned it to his wallet. I was the one who needed to learn to trust, to let people in, to believe that I could have a family and still be the person I wanted to be. You taught me that. Jasmine kissed him softly. We taught each other. As they sat there under the stars with the house quiet behind them and their children safe in their beds, Lucas felt the profound rightness of his life. He had come to Willow Avenue to evict a family, armed with legal documents and a heart hardened by years of self-protection. Instead, he had found himself, the part of him that had been missing since he was 12 years old and lost his parents. He had found love and family and purpose and home. He had learned that the greatest wealth came not from building an empire, but from building relationships, from showing up every day for the people who mattered, from choosing love over fear and connection over isolation. And it had all started with a knock on a door, a mother's desperate plea, and a child's crayon drawing that had cracked open his carefully constructed walls and let the light in. Sometimes the endings that feel inevitable turn out to be beginnings in disguise. Sometimes the person who seems like a threat becomes the answer to prayers you did not know you were praying. And sometimes when you are brave enough to trust, brave enough to let yourself be vulnerable, brave enough to believe that happiness is possible even after loss, you discover that home is not a place, but the people who love you exactly as you are. Lucas Bennett had learned all that and more, and as he sat with his wife under the stars, he knew with absolute certainty that his life had truly begun the day Jasmine Hayes opened her door and let him in.